Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to deal with the lesson Lullaby by Leslie Marmon Silko. I have posted the lesson, the text on the WhatsApp group. You can just go through the lesson and read it, and you will get an idea about what this is all about. So, this lesson, Lullaby, is part of the module titled Indigenous Identities. Now, when we talk about indigenous society, we realize that every indigenous society has something very unique, something very distinct of its own to communicate. And when we read the literature of indigenous people, we understand that this literature is laden with oral traditions. Like, you have myth, you have nature, you have life represented it's in all its fullness, right? And these indigenous people, they usually celebrate uh, myths, they celebrate mythological connections, they celebrate communal life, they talk about intergenerational ties and all that. And we also find that they have a lot of connections to the animal world, to the spiritual world. And we understand when we read these works, we understand that these are marginalized people, or people whom the so-called dominant cultures would uh, set apart or maybe keep aside, right? And these people have a lot of historical affinities, a lot of cultural affinities with specific regions. So you have three lessons here in this particular module, Indigenous Identities. One is Lullaby by Leslie Marmon Silko. The other one is Garwali Songs, and it's an anonymous. We don't know who has written it. The writer is anonymous. And then we also have a lesson titled Pinyar the Widow by Mamang Dai. So these are the three lessons in this particular module, and you would find that all these three lessons would speak about indigenous contexts, the distinct nature, the unique nature of these people. And this particular lesson, Lullaby, it speaks about the Native American culture, right? The kind of culture which the Europeans or the so-called dominant cultures kept apart. They tried to, we talk about trying to civilize them, trying to make them lose their own identity, trying to make them lose their own culture, because the so-called dominant cultures always felt that these natives or the indigenous tribes were, I would say, they used to consider them as uncivilized, and they felt that they had to civilize them. But what resulted was, it was not just kind of making them lose their culture. It was just like taking a part of their life. And these marginalized, I would say, these marginalized tribes, they tried to bring out their pain, and they tried to bring out their cultural beauty in their writings. So this one particular lesson that has been prescribed for you, which we're going to look to see today, is titled Lullaby, and it is written by Leslie Marmon Silko. And when you talk about this author, she was born in a place called Albuquerque. It is in United States, and it is it's a province of New Mexico in the United States, and it's she was a native. She belonged to the Laguna Pueblo native tribe, right? So the Laguna Pueblo is I would say it's a federally recognized tribe of Native American Pueblo people. And they lived in this particular place, west central New Mexico, near the city of Albuquerque. It is in the United States, right? And she was a Native American poet and a novelist. And basically, Leslie Marmon Silko wrote about the problems that the American Indians faced because of their the conflict with the white cultures. The whites would not accept them. They felt that these people were beneath them, or they were not people who were kind of civilized as them or cultured as them. So she belonged to this Laguna Pueblo tribe. So she grew up on the Laguna Pueblo area in New Mexico, and she learned a lot about the Laguna traditions, about the myths. And she graduated from the University of New Mexico. She went on to become, she wanted to become a lawyer, so she went to law school. But she abandoned her legal studies and then she went to do her graduate work in English literature, right? And she decided to pursue a writing career. So the first publications, the first publication that she brought out was a collection of, or an anthology of short stories, and also a anthology or a set of poems, a poetry collection. It was titled Laguna Woman, which was brought out in 1974, right? And Leslie Marmon Silko has been referred to as the uh, premier Native American writer of her generation, because she was one person who used to take an inspiration from the stories of the Laguna Pueblo people whom she had heard about in her childhood. So she tries to combine the concepts of spirituality, the Laguna spirituality, and she tries to speak about the relationship that human beings have with natural elements, and she tries to portray the struggles of the Native American people, how they try to retain their culture in a so-called Anglo world, in a so-called white world. So this is what she speaks about. And this particular story, Lullaby, is a story which speaks about Native American people. So when you read the story, we understand, that this is like a story about an old woman, a Native American woman called Aya. Her name is Aya, and this old woman is actually thinking about the tragic loss of her son, and how her children are taken away by the white people, and how her husband is exploited by the white rancher for whom he works. So, in this story, we find this intergenerational matrilineal ties, the motherly ties, and it is very strongly, particularly very strongly portrayed in this story, because here we see the protagonist or Aya trying to focus on the activities which she had learned as a child, the activities which are so very particular to her native culture, like storytelling, weaving, etc., right? So this is the story of Aya. So when we read Lullaby, we find, how the story begins with Aya leaning against a tree, and she is thinking about the most tragic events of her life, and she's also thinking about her roles as a grandmother. And there's a kind of mixture, like a mixture of happy events and tragic events, right? So she has become old, and her life has become memories, and she thinks about her mother. She recalls, she imagine, or she thinks about, or she has this memories about her mother weaving outside when she was a child, weaving outside on her big loom, and her grandmother spinning wool into thread. She has memories of all that, and she also remembers how her mother, and how her the midwife who assisted her mother helped her to give birth to her first child, whom she named Jimmy, right? And she also remembers how a white man had come and informed her that Jimmy had died in a helicopter crash in the war, right? And so this white man speaks to them in English, and Aya does not understand English, right? Because she is a Native American and she has never learned English. And her husband, whose name is Chateau, he knows English. So he translates the tragic news of the death of her son to Aya. And then, it's not the death of her son that hurts her the most. It is also, the memory of the time when her two young children, Danny and Ella, they were taken away from her. The reason is, the white people felt that they had to civilize these Native Americans, and so they used to come and take the children away and put them in school and try to make them just like the whites, and then they would lose everything that was indigenous to them, everything that was very particular to their own culture. So she remembers when Danny and Ella were taken away from her, how the people, white people, came to her and they made her sign a paper. And she did not know English, right? She could not read because she never knew English. So she just simply signed the paper because she was afraid of these people. And you know why she signed? Because she thought that these people would go away because she signed. She was very much afraid of them. But when she signed it, she realized that they were taking the children away from her. That is when she realized that she had given them permission to take her children away from her. So this is how these white people exploited these indigenous Native Americans, because they knew that these people never knew how to read or write. So they would come with a paper and they would frighten them and they would make them sign and take their consent without their knowledge. It was a very tricky affair. So when she realized that her children were were going to be taken away from her, she grabs her children and she runs away into the hills, right? And she waits there the entire day. She waits till her husband's shadow comes home. So, first the white people tried to chase her, but then they left because she's a traditional woman, so she knows the places very well and she's very energetic and athletic. So they tried to chase her, but then they gave up and left. So they came back the next day and they came back with a policeman, and then Chateau speaks to them and then explained to her that the paper that she had signed had given them permission to take the children away, right? And so what did they say? These white people said that these children had a grandmother, that is Aya's mother, and Aya's mother had died of tuberculosis, and they have come to take these children away from them because the children had also contracted tuberculosis, so they had to treat them. So that is a lie that they told her. So they take the children away from her, and Aya is very angry with her husband Chateau. Why? Because it was Chateau who had taught her to sign her name, and she says it's because Chateau had taught her to sign her name that she signed, and she signed it out of fear. But she says that if she did not know how to sign, the children would not have been taken away from her. That's what she felt, but that was not the truth, because the children would anyway be taken away from her, because that was what the Europeans, or the whites were trying to do. They were trying to take these Native Americans and civilize them and make them like themselves. So in the process they would make sure that the cultural identity was lost. So whether the mother signs or not, they would take the children away by some way or the other. But Aya is very angry with her husband, and this actually creates a kind of rift in their relationship, and it's from then that they don't sleep together also, because she's not able to connect with him, because she feels very bad, she feels very hurt that it was because of him that she lost her children, right? And then these children are brought back for visit sometimes, and whenever they come for visit, they're accompanied by white women, right? And these white people who come with these children, they're very nervous and they're very anxious, especially when Danny and Ella speak to Aya in the native language, right? And they always would say that Aya was not a good mother, right? And they were trying to teach the children English. And they wanted the children to forget the Pueblo language, the native language, Laguna Pueblo language. And Aya also starts feeling quite disconnected from our children, right? Because the children came to visit sometimes, and I think, it's when you read the story, you understand that the last time they had come, they were not even able to speak to their mother in their own native language, right? And Ella was very young; she was an infant when she was taken away, and she did not even recognize Aya, as she could not even recognize her mother. So we understand how much of brainwashing had been done, how these children had been so much how they had become so much part of the white culture, how much they had been schooled, that they forgot their own native language, they forgot their mother, they forgot who their mother was, they forgot their identity, everything. That is what the white people were trying to do, that and that was their only intention, to take these children and make them like the whites. So that was their agenda, right? And then, Aya sitting and she's reminiscing, like she's thinking of all this, reminiscing, and she has these reminiscences and she thinks about, when the white rancher for whom Chateau was working, when he tells Chateau that you're too old to work, right? And he says, I'm going to throw you out of your house, I'm going to evict you out of your house, right? And so Chateau loses his job, and he's not able to work, but then they get federal assistance. The government tries to help them. The government would give them money every month to survive, and every time they got the check from the government, Shatter would go, he would cash the check, and he would go and spend it at a bar. Right? He would drink and he would spend the entire money. So, here we see towards the end of the story, Aya is going to look for her husband Shato in the bar, right? And she does not find him in the bar. So she was thinking, and now we come back to the present. So it was, there's a kind of flashback here. So she thinks about her past, she thinks about her elder son Jimmy who died, she thinks about her mother, she thinks about Danny and Ella, and then she suddenly comes back to the present because now Shato has not come back. So Shato has gone to the bar. So she goes to the bar to search for him, and there she doesn't find him. So she goes out in search of him, and she sees him walking home. And then they stop to rest, and he lies down on the snow, right? It's snowing, and then Aya realizes that Shato is dying, right? So what she does is she takes a blanket and she puts that blanket around him. She tucks a blanket around him, and she begins to sing a lullaby her grandmother had sung when she was very little, right? Because, and the story, in the end of the story, it's like this. It says, and she sang the only song she knew how to sing for babies, right? She could not remember if she had ever sung it to her children, but she knew that her grandmother had sung it and her mother had sung it. So that is the only song that she knows, the song that she had heard her grandmother and mother sing to her, a lullaby. A lullaby is a song that we sing for babies to put them to sleep. So she realizes here that Chateau is dying, right? So she sings this lullaby to him, right? So that is how this story ends, because she never remembers. I mean, she says, I can't remember whether I have sung this for my own children, but she says that I have heard my grandmother and my mother sing it, right? And so that's how the song is. The song is like this: the earth is your mother, she holds you. The sky is your father, he protects you. Sleep, sleep. Rainbow is your sister, she loves you. The winds are your brothers, they sing to you. Sleep, sleep. We are together always. We are together always. There never was a time when this was not so. So, this is how she sings, because this is the only song that she knows, right? And this song itself, we understand how much it is linked to the native tradition, the kind of spiritual world, the kind of animal world, the nature, which was so important to these Native Americans. And this song encompasses all that: the spirituality, the kind of love for nature. They always used to treat nature as God, and they used to adore and they used to respect nature very much. That's how the Native Americans, not like the whites. The whites kind of destroyed natural beauty. They used to cut down everything. Whereas the Native Americans were not like that. They protected nature. They knew that nature was very important, and they used to respect nature very much. So we see how much this song encompasses all the Native American, excuse me, culture about nature, about spirituality, about God, right? It is a kind of, I would say, pantheistic kind of song where you see God in nature, right? So this is how the story ends. So this is the story for you. So when we analyze the story, we understand that there are a few important characters. The most important character, the protagonist in the story Lullaby, is Aya, right? Aya is the main character, right? And so when we look at the story in the present tense, we see Aya as an old woman who has memories about her, about her own personal history. memories about her grandmother weaving outside, memories about her mother and the midwife delivering her first child, Jimmy, right? And she remembers the birth of her first child. She remembers how Jimmy had died in a helicopter crash in the war, and she remembers about her two young children, Danny and Ella, who were taken away by white doctors, and how they lied to her, right? How they had tried to tell her that these children had contracted tuberculosis and they wanted to treat them, and how these children had lost their cultural identity after being schooled by the whites, right? She also thinks about her husband Chateau, and Chateau was, kind of a mediator in many of her significant interactions with the white authorities, because Chateau was a person who could speak English, right? So this is Aya's past tense, her personal history, right? And we come back to the present, right? So there is a kind of shift from the past to the present. So in the present time, we see how Aya goes looking for Chateau. Chateau has not come home in the evening, and she goes to the bar because she knows that he would be in the bar, right? And that is where he's usually found on the days when they get the cash or the check, the small assistance check that the government gives them. And she finds him, she doesn't find him there, right? So when she leaves the bar, she comes upon him walking home. And, she knows that when Chateau lies down on the snow to rest, she understands that Chateau is about to die. And then she wraps a blanket about him and she tries to sing him a lullaby, because he's going to, sleep, eternally sleep. So she has never done that for her children. So she decides to do that for her husband. So, we see that the kind of there was a rift between them after the children had been taken away, because Aya always blamed Chateau for the loss of her children. But towards the end, Aya singing this lullaby for Chateau shows the kind of reconciliation. She knows that her husband is going to die, so she lulls him to eternal sleep, singing the lullaby of her childhood, which she had heard her mother and grandmother sing. And the other character is Chateau, right? Chateau is Aya's husband, and Chateau understands English. He speaks English, and because his wife is not able to speak English, many times he is the mediator between the family's interactions with the between him, his family, and the white authorities, right? So when the white people initially come to inform them that Jimmy has died in a helicopter crash, it is Chateau's job to translate that devastating news to Aya, right? So Chateau has to break the news to his wife. And we know that he works on a ranch, and his employer is a white rancher. And Chateau has, in between, his leg is injured in the midst of the job. But his white boss has no sympathy for him, right? That is how these whites treat these Native Americans. They have no sympathy for such people. And when the white doctors come and they try to, the police also come, they try to take the children away from them, it is Chateau who has to communicate to Aya that she has unknowingly signed the children away to the white people. And, it's every time it is Chateau who has to break the shattering news to Aya, because he's the only one who knows English. And he understands that there is a rift between him and his wife, because he knows that it is Aya blames him for the loss of her children, and Aya does not sleep with him after that, right? And now he's when you come to the present, you see him as an old man, and he is sometimes disoriented, very confused, and sometimes Aya sees him walking towards the ranch. They have actually kicked him out of his job, but she sees him walking towards the ranch, feeling that still has his job. He becomes very disoriented, very confused, and whenever their assistance check arrives from the government, you see how Chateau immediately cashes it, and he goes and drinks and he finishes the money, he drinks it out, right? So but towards the end, you see how Chateau is dying, and Aya singing a lullaby to him, right? And when we talk about Danny and Ella, they were very small children, right? And they were taken away from their parents at a very tender age. And the schooling and the kind of brainwashing they received at the hands of the whites actually make them very oblivious to their own culture. They forget their own culture because they were very young when they were taken away, and when they live in the with the whites for a long time, they naturally, like any child, they does both of them forget what their culture is. They forget their own native language. They even forget who their parents are, right? So they've become in and out the whites, and like the whites. That's what the whites wanted them also to become. And the whites who come to take the children away, and they are people who are so typically European. I mean, they always feel that the Native Americans do not have anything good in them. So they come and they cook up a story about the children contracting tuberculosis from their grandmother. They trick Aya into signing a piece of paper which gives them permission to take the children away. Right? Aya doesn't understand what she's signing, but she signs because she's afraid of them, right? So when Aya runs away with the children, they try to chase her, but they're not able to keep up with her strength, right? So then they come back with a police officer and they take the children away. So this is part of their agenda, how they want to so-called civilize the Native Americans, because they feel that they are savages, they are cultureless, they're uncivilized, right? And we also get a picture about Aya's grandmother and mother. They don't appear in the story in the present, but they come only in Aya's memories, or the kind of old memories that Aya has, right? So Aya recalls her grandmother making thread from wool, and how she has passed on the traditional songs, the lullaby. So the grandmother is a very significant generational link in the matrilineal culture, because this tribe, the Laguna Pueblo tribe, followed this matrilineal culture, whereby women pass on the tradition in the form of stories. So that is how we see how Aya has got this lullaby in her mind. She remembers her grandmother singing it to her, and she remembers her mother singing. So when Chateau is dying, she lulls him to sleep, to eternal sleep, by singing this lullaby. So the grandmother is very significant as a generational link, because this particular tribe, the Laguna Pueblo tribe, they follow the matrilineal culture. And we also get an idea about Jimmy. Jimmy was Aya's firstborn child. She talks about how he was born when her mother and the midwife assisted in his birth, and he had gone to war, and he dies in a helicopter crash, right? And this blanket, which Aya uses in the end and to wrap her husband Chateau, is a blanket that Jimmy had sent to her while he was at war. He had sent her this blanket. So she always keeps that blanket with her. And ultimately, towards the end, when Chateau dies, she wraps Chateau with that blanket, right? So we also see the other whites. One is the rancher. The white women. The rancher is Chateau's employer. And he is a typical figure of white authority. And we feel how he contributes to the most tragic events of Aya's life, right? When Chateau injures his leg, the rancher does not pay him. See, when he feels that Chateau is too old to work, he just throws him out of the job, throws them out of their house, right? And the white women are the people who accompany Aya's children when they come to visit her, right? And these, they would be maybe social workers or teachers or something like that. But, these women are very anxious. They never want the children to speak to Aya in the native tongue, right? Because they always feel that Aya lives in an environment which is quite unfit for raising these children, and they don't want the children to speak to Aya in their native tongue, in the Laguna Pueblo native tongue, because they are so typical, hell bent on civilizing these children. So these are some of the characters in this particular story. So I've given you a basic overview of the Laguna Pueblo tribe. I've also spoken to you about Leslie Marmon Silko, and we've just seen how this story is. I've given you an overview of the plot and the characters. Now, I will go into the themes of this story in the next class. So before that, I want you to go home. I've sent the story to you. If you don't have the story, you can read the story. I've sent it to your group, and you can come back after reading the story so that when I explain the themes to you, it'll become more clear. I hope this is clear. Today's lesson, I hope it's clear. If you have any doubts, you can ask me now.